So my first question is, why did you join the Navy?
I had to join. It was a time when you were a certain age, they came and they took you, and you were forced to join any service you wanted. And I said, oh, I want the Navy. I could have been the Army, or I could have been the Air Force, but I loved sailing boats, and have you been up to Bass Lake?
No.
Okay, all right.
So you were drafted.
Yeah, and then I was drafted, but when I said I want to go in the Navy, they said, okay, we'll draft you into the Navy.
Okay.
And some guy said, oh, no, I don't hang about that. They wanted to be drafted into the Army or Air Force. I wanted the Navy because I was so used to being up in Lake Michigan. Does that kind of solve your problem? Oh, your question, I mean.
Yeah. All right. Question number 2 is, how long did you serve in the military?
2 years in the, huh?
3 years.
3?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Why don't you tell them the dates?
Yeah, 42 to 45, it's 3 years, yeah. And this is the first time I've looked at this in a long time. And as I always tell everybody, Wheeler, you're almost 100 years old, and I am 93 years old, so I'm close to being 100 years old.
Yeah.
And so when you get that old, all of a sudden, a lot of things you lose sight of until you see it. Oh yeah, that's right, 3 years. Okay,
Yeah.
you have more questions?
Yes. All right. Question number 3 was, what was your role during the war?
I was the person who took care of steering the sea, steering the, what do you call it? Huh?
Steering the boat?
Yeah, the wheel,
The helm.
the helm. See, I have a problem pulling stuff out. I would get up in the morning and go to breakfast, and I would be assigned at a certain time up at the helm. And then we would, there was 3 or 4 of us that were steering the helm. And we take turns, we go downstairs for, down below and have a cup of coffee or something, and then come back up again, you'd be at the helm. And then the officer was up on top of the ship, and he'd go along and he says, I think I see some German submarine. Go over that way. And he'd go to the starboard, whatever it was. See, I can't even remember the name of a lot of this stuff. And then I turned, we would want to get away from the German submarine because he'd be shooting at us. And then after we knew where he was, then we'd charge him. And we'd go right over the top of him and we would drop depth charges. And I don't know if we sank any, I never saw any of the ships that we might have sunk, but we chased them away. And I'm sure we sunk a couple of them. And that means all these sailors on those boats died as their ship went underwater,
All right. The next question is, what was your lifestyle like? Kind of like your daily routine.
What was your what?
Your lifestyle.
Lifestyle?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the Navy, I was not an officer. They were in charge of making all decisions, and they'd say, "Hey, somebody's got to clean up the all the food dishes that weren't washed. Walter, go wash those dishes." And so I'd be told to do these sort of things. But when we were out at sea, and it was a rough sea, we all had to be very careful. But then we were told there were the German submarines were around there. If you spot one, and we had equipment that could look down under the water, it was electronic, and then we started dropping bombs on them. And I never did see one, whether I got it or we didn't get it. Because if we got it, it sunk. And most of them had to run because there'd be 2 or 3 of us in this same size of a boat, and we'd all be chasing one submarine. He couldn't get away. German submarine couldn't get away, and he would do his best to go down as far as he could and get away. Some of them got away, but
How about the sleeping quarters? What were they like?
huh?
How were your sleeping quarters?
Sleeping quarters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, very similar to your bedrooms here, except that there was 2. Was there 3? There might have been 3 at times of beds, and we'd get up in the morning. We had to make your own bed, and if it's on the top of it, straight. And then during the sometime after we made the bed, the officer would come through and check to make sure that everybody made the beds like they should. And then they'd say, okay, time for breakfast. And then we'd all go to breakfast. Well, not all of us, because if we were out in the water, only a few would be at breakfast. And then when we go back on board, back on top of the ship, then the other people that were there, they'd go to breakfast. And we'd just take turns going to breakfast. And then after breakfast, all of us would be together. No one would be eating or anything. But we had men on board ship that had equipment. We could search for enemy ships or airplanes even.
Mm-hmm. All right. I know you didn't stay in any camps, but did you stay on the same boat the whole time, or did you like?
I was on only on one boat, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where did you travel during the war?
Well, let me see. We traveled over to Europe, and
You started from where? You were based in Cuba.
Cuba. That's right, and that's where a lot of our ships started off. Boats and ships, the little ones and the big ships, go to Cuba. But then other big, we'd be taking crews on big ships. Not we, but I mean, we'd be taking 100 soldiers on a ship and go over to Europe, and then they'd be fighting the war in Europe, the Germans in Europe or something. And I would be on board the smaller boats that were protecting these big ships that had all the, maybe they had 500 soldiers on it. And they didn't want anybody to sink a ship with 500 soldiers and lose 500 of our soldiers.
Did you ever go to South America?
Yeah, but I never got off. Yes. I'm trying to think of what the town was. Because we went down there to, we were attacking German soldiers that were there. Our ships went down there, and we were protecting our ships. Now, I don't know if I got on, went ashore, because it was kind of a dangerous thing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Are there any standout locations, and if so, why did they stand out?
Is there any what?
Standout locations, like memorable.
Did you go any place that you really enjoyed going
Oh.
on the boat?
Really, you're 100 years old. Yes. After we chased the Germans away, then we would go ashore and make sure everything was all right in the different towns that were on the shoreline, you know. And I can remember going ashore and talking to certain people there, and some of them spoke English, and a lot of them didn't speak English. But I had studied Spanish, I guess it was, and I could speak to some of them. But then they would, when we would come ashore, they were glad to see us because they knew the Germans were just going to take all our stuff away from them and use it to fight the Americans. I mean, but anyway, then we would drive those enemy soldiers, sailors away, and it was sometime a problem because we got into a fighting deal with them, and we were out trying to sink the German submarines. And I don't know if we ever really sank one, but none of them ever came up.
All right, what were your comrades like?
What were my what?
Comrades.
What?
What were your comrades like, the people on your boat?
What were my comrades? They were like my brothers. And I don't recall any boats that we had any women on board. But women, later on, women were on board the ships and so on. But all we had was men on board. And we got to know them, and a lot of them were just my age. I mean, it was 18 or 19 years old, you know. And we got so that we trusted them. I mean, one or two boys would be asked to be walking around the outside of the ship, making sure they didn't see anything, and then they come back and they say, "We didn't see anything." And if they said, "Yeah, we think we saw someone," then I'd go out there with them. But it didn't happen too often. Because by the time I got in there, we were getting close to near the end of the war.
All right, do you have any stories?
Do we have what?
Stories.
Stories?
Any memorable stories about being on the boat?
I didn't have. I knew I was supposed to think about some things, and I'll try to think about some things. But it was easy to live on board American ships. They were well taken care of. There was plenty of food, and some of the other ships, like German ships, they were running out of food. I mean, we were chasing them all over the place, and they were having a much tougher time than we were. And then after being out, say, for 3 or 4 days, our boat would be refueled. We had refueling ships would refuel us, and then we still continue with convoys. And the refueling ships were mostly just big tanks of fuel. They couldn't fight the war. They were giving us the fuel so that we could fight the war. And,
You have any funny stories?
any funny stories? Let's see. Oh yeah, the funniest story I ever had was we went ashore on a boat, and we came back into port, and we should be helping the ship to be tied up at the
dock.
At the dock, yeah. And my friends, they came to me, they picked me up and they threw me into the water, into the ocean. And it was deep water there. I don't know how deep it was. Big ships were coming in there, you know. But they knew that I couldn't get hurt. But it was so much fun to do something, to see somebody get thrown into the water. And then I went down pretty deep, you know, maybe 3 or 4 feet of water, and then I came up and I swam back to the deck, and they laughed. They said, I forget now what they would say, something like maybe "go away" or something, you know. But no, then they picked me up. But that was an experience. I wasn't expecting it.
All right, did you fight in any big battles? And if you did, what were they?
What?
Did you fight in any big battles?
No, by the time I was on this boat, and we were going out with the big one, there was some fighting, but that wasn't any big battle. I mean, they wasn't shooting anything. They were just attacking, dropping depth charges on anything they thought was enemy submarine. And there were some enemy submarines, and so we were always worried about them. And if we think somebody, we had instruments on board ship that could send a signal out underwater. And if they could spotted something, and I remember we went out and we dropped everything on we could, and then we stopped and waited for them to come up and turn themselves in, and a big whale came up and was killed, blasted all to pieces. What we thought was a ship was a whale. And that scared everybody because we thought we were being attacked by a big boat, big German submarine. No. Well, that was the most time that I ever had where I really was scared to death almost, because I thought that we were going to be attacked by this huge thing underwater, you know. And the Germans had some big boats. They would send big ammunition underwater at you, and that would hit you and blow your ship up. But by the time I got in, we were blowing them up.
Mm-hmm. All right, how did the bombing of Pearl Harbor affect you and your friends?
How did it affect us?
Yeah.
Well, I knew it was going on, but I was never at Pearl Harbor when it was being bombed. Because it was getting close to the end of the war when I got into the service, and we were chasing the Germans back to Germany. And I remember pictures of we followed a whole bunch of German sailors and soldiers, and they went back and landed on their back on Germany, and then they came out of the wherever it was. And they all had their hands up in the air. They were surrendering.
All right, what was it like to come home and see your family again?
What was it like to what?
Come home.
We were all waiting for it. And I had a chance to come home once, just for a short time, and then I had to go back to the ship. But the war was theoretically was over. But I remember I got a certain time. What was it now? They gave me a discharge if I wanted to have a discharge, and I did. And I was married. A couple of weeks earlier than that, I got married, but to my wife, Mary, and she was waiting for me to see me to wave goodbye. And I found out that the war was over, and we were all, anybody who wanted to go home could go home. You had to sign out, and so I signed out, and we went back to DePaul University, and I finished my college education, which I hadn't finished.
Okay, the next questions, you don't have to answer them if you don't want to.
I'll answer any question.
All right, how do your experiences during the war still affect you?
How did it affect me? I got in the war too late to have terrible. I didn't see people being killed and all that sort of stuff. We were doing all the killing, so it was pretty nice. Had I been at the first of the war, they were sinking our Navy boats, and they were shooting us. They were beating us until we got all these things together. We started building new Navy boats. I'm trying to think of the name of all the boats. But when the war was almost over, it was a nice time to be in the Navy because we were beating the heck out of Germans. We were chasing them back to Germany and sinking. I don't know how many people, soldiers and sailors, we killed because we sunk their ships. As soon as we see one, we'd sink them, and the enemy probably didn't. A lot of them wouldn't get out of their boat. Didn't make it out.
Mm-hmm. All right. Looking back, do you regret joining the military?
I've got a problem. Yeah, I got these earplugs, but they're not doing a good job. What?
Yeah. Do you regret joining the military?
Do you regret
Do I regret?
joining the military?
Oh no. you couldn't regret it at the time. Germany was a very powerful nation to begin with, and they were attacking us, and they were going to try to actually take everything from the United States, everything we owned and everything, go back to Germany and maybe even sink a lot of our ships and so on, but we stopped it, and then it wasn't until we were stopping it that I finally enlisted in the service, and it was a much easier time for me. I didn't see a lot of heavy shot, other than dropping depth charges. I saw some of that because some of the German submarines were still out.
If you could change one decision during the war, what would it be?
Did I change?
If you could change one decision of the war, what would it be?
Well, I don't know. When we fought the war, we built ships very fast, and we could build a ship real fast, and we started sending the ships out at the Germans, and I don't know how your question was how was what?
What was a decision that you would change?
What
Would you
decision?
have changed any decision that the United States made during the war?
No. If I would have been an officer, I might have been able to have more feelings to it. But I had no chance of changing anything. The officers were fully in charge.
Mm-hmm.
American officers, not the German officers.
Yeah. All right. Did joining the military change you for the better or for the worst?
Did the what?
Did joining the military change you for the better or for the worst?
Were the
Did it change you for the better or the worse?
well, we won the war.
You personally.
Well, me?
Did it make a better man or a worse man out of it?
Oh, no. It didn't make me mad about being in the service. I enjoyed being in the service. I was on board these ships out at sea, and I enjoyed it. And when they said, "Hey, we want you to learn certain things," I went and I did that. I learned how to do
Morse code?
Morse code and so on. We had to know that. So that any enemies would, when we did something in English, they would know English. The Germans could speak it.
So
English.
being in the service made you a better man?
Oh yeah, I learned what living was all about, and I know our ships sank a number of their ships, and the guys that were on the German ships, they went down with their ships. Mm-hmm. Some of them got out, but a lot of them didn't. So it was kind of hard to believe it, but I had a part in actually steering the boat. You saw the picture of my boat, mm-hmm. And I would. The officer would say, "Okay, we see a couple German submarines go over there, and we'll drop the depth charges on it." So I see it, and I go right over it, and I said, "We're right over it," and they dropped the depth charges on it, and the German submarine never came back up. Mm-hmm. And we were winning the war. The Germany gave up pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, do you want to talk about the pictures that you have?
I could. Well, I haven't seen many of these pictures recently. Okay, this is the boat I was on. Now, boats, these aren't much bigger than a rowboat. I mean, well, they're twice as big as a rowboat, but they're not a human boats, Navy boats, which would have 500 sailors on them. My boat, this thing only has maybe 10 or 15 at the most. It's a small one. but we were fast. These boats were almost like a speedboat, you know. Who's that guy, you know?
That's you.
It even looks like me, doesn't it? Now, I don't remember now why that picture was taken. I think it was near the end of the war, and
You're pressing the button.
oh, I didn't mean to. It was getting near the end of the war, and things were very much better. We were chasing the German submarines back into Germany. They were trying to come overland in the different countries around America, and we chased them all out. And okay, now here's the pilot, and is that me?
I don't know. I can't tell from here.
No, that's not me. It's none of the sailors. Now, if you notice, we don't have any shirts on. Officers, yes, they have to have their uniforms on all the time. But if it was hot out, we'd take everything off and so you get a nice suntan. It was nice being in the Navy, I'll tell you. Okay, here. Probably I did this possibly just to have the picture taken. But it might be real. I don't remember now. But we would signal. I had to know how to do signaling, and there'd be a ship following me, one of our own ships following me, almost a quarter of a mile away. But I could see them, and we could send light signals to them. Now, we wouldn't send a radio signal because we knew the enemy would be hearing that, but the light signal. Unless they were facing the thing, that they wouldn't know what the signal was. Okay, where am I on there?
That's the machine gun.
Right here. I can't see it from. Oh no, here's the machine gun over here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and machine guns. If you were in a smaller boat trying to fight somebody, and he came up in a fast boat with had machine guns shooting at you, and we ended up having good ammunition and machine guns and so on, and that's why we beat the Germans.
These are your comrades.
Am I on there?
No, you took the picture.
Oh. I love to take pictures. I still got my camera that I had in the service. I haven't. I should have brought that. I don't know where it is. It's in the bedroom someplace. Am I on here?
No.
I don't.
No, you took this picture. So
Yeah, well, that's right. You were just saying. And if you were taking pictures, then that's not too good because you weren't in the pictures.
Which one of these guys threw you in the water?
Oh, it was 3 or 4 guys. They all got a hold of me, picked me up. Some guys had a hold of my feet, some guys had a hold of my arm, and they just threw me in the water. And you see where this roof is right here? And then the water would be down below here. And so I fell that far before we even hit the water. But they knew I was a good swimmer, so this was something they were doing for fun. They weren't mad at me or anything, and they were ready to. Oh, I'd see. It seems to me they threw a couple things over for me to grab a hold of a line, and then they pulled me up on the water.
Okay, that's the last picture.
And you got so you really became friends with the men on board your same ship, They would apparently have every now and then, especially after the war, they were starting to dismiss people, and I wanted to go back to school, and I told them, so they considered it. He said he's going back to college. He can be dismissed right away. and that helped. And I did. I went right back to college. My wife went back with me, Mary, and I kind of enjoyed being in the service because by the time I got in the service, all of the killing of Americans was over. We were killing them. We were chasing the Germans back to Germany, and there was a thing in the TV about a bunch of German people leaving and coming out with their hands up in the air, and they took them and they wanted to ask them questions. Do you have more? What they were asking them, I don't know, but. After the war, I was just lucky that I didn't get in the first of the war where they sunk a bunch of our ships, and I could have been on one of them. But I was in college at the time, and I graduated from college, and then I decided that I better enlist in the service. I did, and I've 3 years in the service.
Mm-hmm. Is there any last thing you want to say before we end the interview?
Wait, I wish let's see what I might have said on here. No, nothing about the Navy. Here's the Navy up here. No, let's see. I was a good swimmer. I've been swimming all my life, and so I didn't. I wasn't afraid if a ship was sunk. I would just jump in the water and swim over to another ship, and I was ready to do that on a couple occasions because the Germans were still shooting at us. But the war was almost over, and suddenly all those people disappeared. They went back to Germany, took all of their into all their army clothing off, and so they didn't want to be chased. And so, but then Germany declared war. They knew they lost the war.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, what's your name?
Walter C. Loague.
Mm-hmm. And what is your birthday?
May 29th, 1923.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm glad. It was kind of interesting that somebody would be interested in what my life was like in the service, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And how old are you now?
I'm 13 years old.
You're 13?
Yeah.
Let's see, when I was 13, I wasn't in the service yet. Because I guess I was 18 when I was in the service. I forget now. Mm-hmm. But then I had to go in, or they would be drafting me. And I spent 3 years in the service before the war was over. And then that was nice. And they said anybody who wants to get served, wants to get out of the service, go home. And I told them I want to go back to college, and so they let me go. They had to keep a lot of sailors on it because when the Germans gave up. Mm-hmm. They decided they didn't want us to destroy all of Germany with bombs and so on, so they gave up. They come running out. I saw a picture of them coming out of the door. I saw them when they were leaving with their hands up in the air. And somebody you're looking for?
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Well, listen, I thank you for your interest. Okay, give me a good hold on her. That's where you got it. That means you're almost a man when you can.
Yeah.
Shake. Mm-hmm. It was very nice talking to you, and I hope I answered most of your questions. I haven't had a chance to think about it, but also, I'm almost 100 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard for me to bring up a lot of stuff. And I got a lot of stuff on. Were you able to make a copy of this?